Jonas Ardell stood at the edge of the rugged wilderness, his boots sinking slightly into the soft alien soil. The air was thick and heavy, filled with the scent of strange flowers and the distant hum of unseen creatures. His small exploration team had just landed on this uncharted planet, a place far beyond the known territories of humanity. The mission was simple: map the area, gather data, and return home. Nothing more, nothing less. Yet, as Jonas scanned the horizon, something felt different about this place. It wasn't just the landscape that seemed unfamiliar. It was the silence. There was no chatter of wildlife, no rustling of leaves, just an eerie stillness that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. His instincts told him that this planet held secrets, but what they were, he couldn't yet know.
"Captain, we've finished the preliminary scans,"
came a voice from behind. It was Sergeant Lara, his second-in-command, holding a small device that displayed their findings. Jonas glanced at the data.
"Anything unusual?"
"Some energy signatures, but nothing that seems out of place for a planet this far out. No signs of civilization." Jonas nodded, his gaze shifting back to the horizon.
"Keep an eye out for anything we might have missed." As they continued their work, Jonas found himself drawn further into the wilderness. The team had split up to gather more samples, but he wanted to explore deeper.
His curiosity often led him away from the rest of the crew. But it was this drive to discover the unknown that had earned him his captaincy. He trekked for hours, following a narrow path through the trees, unsure of what he might find. It was when the sun began to dip below the distant peaks that he saw her, half hidden among the tall grass, her body broken and covered in blood. Jonas stopped in his tracks, his heart racing. She was lying motionless, barely breathing. Her skin was a strange shade of purple, unlike anything Jonas had ever seen. Her clothes were torn, and there were deep gashes across her arms and legs. Her long, dark hair was matted with dirt, and her eyes were closed. Without thinking, Jonas rushed to her side. He knelt down beside her, his hands trembling slightly as he reached out to touch her pulse. It was faint, but steady.
"Hey,"
Jonas murmured, his voice soft.
"Are you okay?"
Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, and Jonas could tell she wasn't from around here. She was not human. But who was she? What had happened to her? He quickly scanned the area, looking for signs of danger. But there was nothing. No creatures lurking in the shadows, no signs of conflict. Just the strange, unsettling calm of the planet. The only noise now was the gentle rustling of the grass as a cool breeze blew through. Jonas didn't know what else to do. He had no medical equipment with him, no supplies to properly treat her injuries, but he wasn't going to leave her there to die. He tore strips from his shirt and began to wrap them around her wounds, doing his best to stop the bleeding. His hands moved quickly, driven by a sense of duty rather than logic. As he worked, he couldn't help but wonder who she was. Her clothing, while torn, had an unusual design, a mix of intricate patterns and metallic accents that looked far more advanced than anything Jonas had seen before. Her features, though alien, had a certain grace to them. Her high cheekbones and sharp features gave her an almost regal look, though her state of unconsciousness did little to suggest that she was royalty. When he had done all he could, Jonas gently lifted her into his arms. He had to get her back to the camp. As he carried her, he couldn't shake the feeling that something about this encounter was important, though he couldn't explain why. The trek back was slow. It wasn't long before his thoughts began to drift. Was she a stranded explorer from another world? Will stop talking to us. A warrior from a distant star system? Jonas had heard rumors of alien races and empires far beyond the galaxy's edge, but nothing had ever been confirmed. He had always considered those stories to be nothing more than legend. But now, as he walked with the strange woman in his arms, he began to wonder if some legends were true. When he finally reached the camp, his crew was waiting. They had set up a small medical station, ready to receive samples and data from the exploration. But they were not expecting anything like this.
"Captain, what happened?"
Lara asked, eyes widening as she saw the woman in his arms. Jonas didn't have an answer. "She was out there, injured. I couldn't just leave her." Laura and the rest of the crew moved quickly, helping Jonas get the woman onto a makeshift bed. They started to work on her wounds, but none of them could identify what she was or where she came from. Jonas stood back, watching them, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He couldn't shake the feeling that this woman, whoever she was, would change everything. His mission, his team, his entire life. It would all be different from this point forward. And yet, in that moment, Jonas couldn't have known just how true that feeling was. The woman he had just saved was not some ordinary traveler or lost soul. She was something far more dangerous, far more powerful than anything the crew had ever imagined. But for now, she was just another mystery to solve. And Jonas Ardell would stop at nothing to uncover the truth. Jonas stood beside the bed where the alien woman lay, watching her closely as his crew worked to tend to her wounds. The medical team had done what they could with limited resources, but no one could make sense of who she was or where she came from. She seemed human enough at first glance, but the more Jonas thought about it, the more he realized how strange everything was. Her features, her skin color, and the way she had been injured, it didn't add up. As the days passed, the woman remained unconscious, her condition improving slowly. Jonas had set up a rotation, ensuring that one of the crew members would always be at her side. They had all kept their distance, unsure of what to make of her. Some of the crew members joked about her being a stranded alien, while others wondered if she was some kind of warrior sent to conquer their planet. Jonas wasn't sure what to think. All he knew was that he couldn't stop thinking about her, about the moment he'd found her in the wilds of the planet. On the third day, something unexpected happened. As the crew went about their tasks, Jonas stayed with the woman, sitting quietly at her side. He noticed a slight twitch in her fingers, then her eyes fluttered open. For a brief moment, she seemed disoriented, her gaze scanning the room as if she didn't recognize her surroundings. Jonas quickly stood up and moved closer, his heart racing. "Hey," he said gently. "You're safe now. You've been unconscious for a few days." The woman's eyes locked onto him, her pupils dilating slightly as if she was trying to make sense of him. She didn't speak at first, but Jonas could see the confusion in her expression. He thought she might try to speak in some foreign language, but instead she simply blinked and then whispered hoarsely, "Who are you?" Jonas hesitated. It was clear that she wasn't from their world, but how much could he tell her? He didn't know who she was, what her intentions were, or even if she could be trusted. But he couldn't lie to her either. "I'm Captain Jonas Ardell. I found you out in the wilderness."
"You were hurt." The woman slowly pushed herself up into a sitting position, wincing as she did.
Her movements were stiff, but her strength was undeniable. She looked at Jonas with eyes that seemed to weigh him, as though measuring him for something he didn't fully understand. I was betrayed," she said softly, her voice hoarse from lack of use. "Left for dead." Betrayed? Left for dead? He had no idea what she meant. Betrayed by who? For a moment the woman's face clouded with emotion. Her jaw clenched and her lips pressed together tightly. "My empire. I was the ruler of a vast star system. And then, those closest to me turned against me. They left me here, abandoned." Jonas felt a chill run down his spine. She was an empress? How could someone with so much power be left to die on a strange planet? And why hadn't she said anything about this before? The idea of an alien empire, with technology and power far beyond anything humanity had encountered, was both fascinating and terrifying. "Your empire?" Jonas repeated, still struggling to comprehend the weight of her words. "You're telling me you were the ruler of an empire?" The woman nodded, her gaze intense.
"Yes, I was Empress Naira."
"And now I'm nothing, just a lost soul." Empress Naira. Jonas had never heard of her, But he had heard stories about distant empires and rulers beyond the known galaxy. Some of them were said to be powerful. Others were only rumors. But this was something different. Naira's eyes seemed to shine with a mix of regret and fury as she spoke, and Jonas could tell there was more to her story than she was letting on. As she spoke, a small part of Jonas felt sympathy for her, but another part of him warned him to be cautious. She was dangerous. If she truly had been an Empress, then her enemies would be out there, hunting for her. What if they came to find her? What if they decided to take out anyone who helped her? "I don't know why I'm telling you this," Naira continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I trust you. But you saved my life, and for that, I owe you." Jonas nodded, unsure of how to respond. He had never been a person to play politics or to get involved in matters of empires and rulers. His life had always been about exploration, about discovery, and about humanity's survival. But now, with Naira in front of him, everything had changed. This wasn't just some lost traveler. This was an Empress, someone with the power to alter the course of history, for better or for worse.
"You don't owe me anything," Jonas said quietly.
"I did what anyone would do." Naira gave him a long look, her expression unreadable. "No, you don't understand. I was betrayed by my own blood, my own people. They thought I was weak. They thought I was finished. But they were wrong." Jonas frowned, sensing a shift in the air. There was something about the way she said that, something in her voice that suggested she wasn't just talking about being left behind on this planet. She was planning something. And Jonas wasn't sure if that something would be good for him, or for anyone else. "Empress Naira," Jonas said carefully, "you've been through a lot, but we're far from home, and we're not prepared for whatever might come next." Her gaze softened, but there was a quiet strength in her eyes. "You've already brought me back from the brink of death, Captain. Now you will see what happens when someone like me is given a second chance." Jonas swallowed, a feeling of unease settling in his gut. He had no idea what kind of power Naira truly had, but he could feel it, the storm that was beginning to gather around her. And in that moment, he knew that his mission had just become far more complicated than he could ever have imagined. The days that followed felt heavier to Jonas than the months he had spent exploring unknown planets. The more he interacted with Naira, the more he understood the weight of her past. She had once ruled over an empire, her power unmatched in the galaxy, but now all of it was gone. Betrayed by her closest allies and abandoned to die on a remote planet, Naira seemed to have lost everything, except for her fierce determination to reclaim what was hers. Jonas tried to maintain his distance, focusing on his crew and their mission, but it was impossible to ignore her presence. Naira's quiet strength had an almost magnetic pull, drawing him in. Despite his caution, he couldn't help but feel sympathy for her. She had suffered, lost everything, and yet she remained resolute. Her past was filled with battles and political schemes that Jonas couldn't fully understand, but he knew one thing for sure. This was no ordinary woman. One afternoon, as Jonas sat in the makeshift camp, scanning through their maps and data, Naira approached him. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something different about the way she carried herself. Her wounds had healed significantly, and though her strength was still returning, there was a fire in her eyes that had not been there before. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice low but steady, "about my future, about what I should do next." Jonas glanced up from his work, surprised to hear her speak so openly. "What do you mean?" he asked, setting aside the tablet he was studying. "My empire is lost. My people are scattered," Naira continued, her gaze fixed on the ground, as though the weight of her thoughts were too much to bear. "But I still have the knowledge, the resources, and the will to rebuild. I will not let them win.
I will take back what is mine.
Jonas wasn't sure how to respond. He had always seen empires as distant concepts, things far beyond the lives of ordinary people. His job was to explore, to chart unknown planets, and to ensure humanity's survival. Politics, betrayal, and power struggles had never been his concern. But now, standing before him was a woman who could change everything. A woman who could possibly bring down entire star systems if she chose to.
I don't know what you want me to say,
Jonas replied, his voice more tired than he intended.
You're talking about an empire that no longer exists. You can't just rebuild it with nothing.
Naira's eyes narrowed, and for the first time since they had met, there was a hint of anger in her voice. I don't need your pity, Captain.
I'm not asking for help. I'm telling you what will happen next.
You should understand this. What I lost is more than a title. It is the future of my people, the very core of what they stood for. They may have thought I was weak, but they were wrong. He could feel the intensity of her words, the raw emotion that lay beneath the surface. It wasn't just a desire for power or control that drove her. It was the sense of duty to her people, to the legacy she had built and lost. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was caught in something far beyond his control. What do you expect me to do? He asked quietly, his tone softer now.
You've been hurt, betrayed. You can't just rush into something without a plan. Naira met his gaze, her expression hardening once more.
I've been betrayed before, Jonas. That was only the beginning.
I will find a way to rebuild, and when I do, you'll see how powerful I can be.
As she turned and walked away, Jonas was left with a sense of unease. He had always prided himself on his ability to stay calm in difficult situations, but Naira was something different. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a force, and Jonas didn't know if he was ready for what that meant. Over the next few days, Jonas noticed the subtle changes in his team's behavior. They had started to treat Naira with more respect, though they were still cautious around her. Some of the crew members spoke in hushed tones about the possibility of helping her reclaim her empire, while others whispered about the risks involved. There were too many unknowns. If Naira truly was who she claimed to be, then helping her could lead to a galaxy-wide conflict. But if she wasn't stopped, who knew what kind of power she could wield? One night, as Jonas sat alone by the campfire, Lara, his second-in-command, came to join him. She sat beside him, her expression serious. "Captain, we need to talk," Lara said, glancing over at Naira, who was resting in the distance.
The crew's getting restless. Some of them think we should help her.
They believe she could lead us to something bigger,
Something more powerful than we've ever imagined. Jonas shook his head, his hands clenched around his cup of water.
We don't even know if she's telling the truth. She says she's an empress, but what does that really mean?
She could be lying to us, playing us for fools.
I'm not saying we should trust her completely,
Lara replied, but we can't ignore the fact that she's one of the most powerful people in the galaxy. If what she says is true, if she has the resources and the knowledge she claims, we could be sitting on the edge of something huge.
But we need to make a decision, Captain. We can't keep standing on the sidelines.
Jonas looked over at Naira, his mind racing. Lara was right. They couldn't stay neutral forever. If Naira was truly an empress, if she truly had the ability to rebuild her empire, then there was no telling what kind of consequences their actions might have. Helping her might bring peace or destruction, and Jonas wasn't sure which one would be worse. I don't know, Lara, Jonas said softly. I don't know what the right choice is. And for the first time since he had met Naira, Jonas felt the weight of the decision bearing down on him. What he did next could change everything, not just for him, but for humanity as a whole. The future was uncertain, and no matter what choice he made, it would lead them all down a path they couldn't yet see. Jonas stood at the edge of the camp, staring out at the distant stars. His thoughts were heavy, burdened by the decision he had to make. The crew was divided. whispers of loyalty to Empress Naira spreading among them. Some believed in her cause, that she could restore order to the galaxy. Others, however, feared what that would mean, knowing that rebuilding an empire could bring untold destruction. The weight of his choices felt unbearable. He wasn't a leader of empires. He wasn't a warrior or a politician. He was a captain, one whose mission had always been about exploration and survival, not power struggles and galactic wars. But here, now, standing on this unknown planet with an alien empress who had once ruled over countless worlds, he knew that whatever choice he made would change the course of everything. Naira had been quiet the last few days, more so than usual. She kept to herself, her thoughts clearly weighed down by the remnants of her lost empire. Jonas had seen her in moments of anger, moments of despair. But now, he saw something else. A woman determined to rebuild, to take back everything she had lost. She wasn't just trying to reclaim power for herself. She wanted to save her people, to restore their place in the galaxy. But Jonas couldn't ignore the dangers that lay ahead. If her enemies were still out there, would they come after her, after all of them? He glanced back toward the campfire where Naira sat, her eyes distant and lost in thought. The firelight danced across her face, revealing a side of her that Jonas hadn't seen before. For all her strength, for all her confidence, she was still a woman who had been betrayed, a leader who had lost everything. Lara approached him quietly, her expression serious, as always. "Captain," she said softly, "the time to decide is coming." Jonas nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. "I know." "The crew is ready," Lara continued. "Some want to follow her, some want to leave, but most, they're scared. They see the power she has, and they don't know if they can trust it." Jonas looked at Lara, his mind racing. "Do you trust her?" Lara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked over at Naira, watching her for a long moment.
I don't know.
"I've never been in this kind of situation before. We all thought we were just here to map the planet. But now we're caught in something much bigger."
Jonas sighed. "If we help her, we might be setting off a war we can't win."
"We could also be part of something that could change everything for the better," Lara said, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "What if we're the ones who help her rebuild?"
"What if we're on the right side of history?" Jonas turned away, feeling the weight of the decision crushing him. "I don't know, Lara. I'm not sure I'm ready to make that call." Lara put a hand on his shoulder, her touch firm and reassuring. "Then we'll make it together." "You're not alone in this, Captain." Jonas took a deep breath and nodded. He knew she was right. This wasn't just about him anymore. It wasn't just about Naira. It was about all of them, his crew, the future of humanity, and the galaxy itself. Whatever path they chose, it would shape the future in ways they couldn't yet understand. Later that night, as the camp settled down and the stars glittered above, Jonas walked over to where Naira sat alone. She didn't look up when he approached, but he could feel her awareness of his presence.
"You've been quiet," he said, his voice gentle. Naira glanced at him, her expression unreadable.
"I've been thinking," she replied, her voice low. "About everything. About my people, my empire, and the galaxy. I know what I have to do, but I also know that doing it will require sacrifices." Jonas sat down beside her, staring out at the stars with her. "What kind of sacrifices?" Naira hesitated for a moment before speaking. "The people who betrayed me, they won't just sit back and let me rebuild."
They'll come for me. And if they come, they'll come for everyone who stands with me.
Jonas looked at her, feeling the tension in the air. "Are you asking for our help?"
Naira turned to face him, her eyes filled with something that could have been regret, but there was also resolve there.
"I don't expect you to help me. I don't expect anything."
"But you saved my life, and now I will rebuild. If you want to leave, I will understand. But if you stay, I will fight for you. For all of us. Jonas was silent for a long moment, his thoughts swirling. The crew was divided, but he knew they would follow his lead. Naira's strength, her determination, was undeniable. But with that strength came the potential for destruction, for chaos, and Jonas knew that if he decided to follow her, they were stepping into a battle they couldn't turn back from. Finally, he spoke. I'm not sure we can win this fight, Naira, but I'm willing to try. Naira's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of something like relief in her eyes. I'll take that as a yes. Jonas stood up, feeling the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. There was no going back now. Whatever happened next, he knew that the galaxy was about to change. Whether it was for better or worse, they would find out soon enough. As the fire flickered and the night grew still, Jonas knew that he had made his choice. They would follow Naira, not just because she was an empress, but because he believed in her vision. And whatever came next, they would face it together.